In this series of interviews, we're taking an informal approach, one-on-one, talking not just about the issues, but also some of the personal things about candidates that often don't get covered. And joining me now, Governor Sean Parnell. So tell me, what do you do in Juneau when you're not on the job and just relaxing?
We've got a yellow lab named Annie, so I love to take her for a run or for a walk, and I do that with Sandy a lot. We enjoy hiking. There are lots of trails, and love the water, the coastal community there. So we're usually trying to get outdoors in some form or fashion.
So, how does that help you do your job?
How does it help me do my job? Kind of clears my mind. I mean, you can't get out in the beauty of Alaska without just being relaxed by it and being able to think through and sort through things while you're out there. But also, I mean, frankly, for me and Sandy, it's also a great time for us to talk and connect.
And what do you talk about often?
What does every man and wife of husband and wife of 27 years talk about? I mean, everything from our kids to our grandchild, our first grandchild is due in mid-November. Our daughter Grace and her husband Austin are having their first child, and so we're looking forward to that.
Do you tap Sandy for political advice?
Do I tap her for political? If it involves our family, yes. You know.
I'm talking about at the Capitol. Do you ask her for her sixth sense on some things?
You know, I do love. The answer is yes when it comes to things like her reaction to a newspaper article, or her reaction to what she sees occurring, because she really does have just a common sense, down-to-earth view of Alaskans and issues and the like. So, when if we got a campaign ad, I'll turn to her and say, "What do you think? How does that strike you?"
So she's a sounding board.
Yes,
then.
she is. Yeah,
so,
clearly.
We know a lot about you, just having observed you over the years in the Senate, as a lieutenant governor, just in many capacities. So what is it that we don't know about you?
Mm-hmm. What is it that you don't know?
What would surprise us, totally floor us to find out about you?
Well, probably something like that I've always enjoyed an electric guitar and raspy male or female vocalist with rock and roll music. So
do you play any instruments?
I don't, but I kind of live that through my son-in-law, who's an excellent musician with his guitars.
So can you tell us a little bit about some experience or some challenge you had or difficulty that was a huge defining point in your life, a turning point, and how you dealt with that challenge?
Yeah, I can think of two. I mean, in particular, one, my grandfather, my grandpa, who's on my mother's side, her father, was one of the two most influential men in my life. And we lost him to colon cancer when I was about 20 or 21 years old. And I went to college in Washington. I left Anchorage to go to school outside, but they lived about 2 hours away from my college campus. And so I would go take care of him on the weekends to relieve my grandma of her being the care provider. So I would sit with him, read to him, bathe him, shave him, and just really watch the struggle of a cancer patient and my grandfather, who I love very much.
The battle to live.
The battle to live, but also then the coming together of a person's faith through that, which my grandpa was amazing in that way, and walked me through the end of his life in a really healthy way, and our family coming together around that. So for me, that was one of those kind of defining moments in my life that I realized you've got to press into life's challenges with the people around you, and reach for each other and reach for your faith in those moments that just require a whole lot more of you than walking every day. The second defining moment was about 1993 or 94, when I was a young state representative in Anchorage, and I represented a South Anchorage area. And I went for my first ride-along with an Anchorage police officer, and I saw that about 75% of the calls were domestic violence calls. And I saw that I'd never seen that in my home, in our home growing up, nor in mine and Sandy's home. And I didn't know that people were suffering like that. And I saw women and children. I saw one family huddled in a closet that we went on a call to address, and another woman with her children standing in the driveway waiting for the police to drive up, because once they called, the perpetrators had run off. And that was really where the passion in me was ignited for domestic violence work in the legislature. I was, like I said, I was a state house representative, and then worked on those issues, including in 1996 when I sponsored and passed and even worked with Governor Knowles on the Domestic Violence Prevention Act of 1996.
What surprises me, because you brought this up before, is your grandfather's struggle with alcoholism.
That was the other one.
The other one.
Yeah.
And that he was actually a street person.
Yeah, so that was my father's father. He, I mean, kind of tough to talk about, but he left my father's family after kicking my father out of the house at 16, and when my dad was still in school. But he ended up in Seattle, and he died in a cheap hotel room as a street person in Seattle. And so that is another part of me, that the reflection and illumination of what alcohol and its addiction does to a person. And yet my father, who went totally the opposite direction, was a loving father to me, a caring father, and in all ways exhibits what a healthy man should be with his wife and with his kids and his grandchildren now. So I've seen some of the worst, and I've seen the best, father that I could ever have. So,
well, let's talk a little bit about the Choose Respect campaign.
Yeah.
Because you've mentioned your grandfather in this, and also just discovering for yourself what domestic violence is all about.
So my parents protected me from him. I never knew about that history with him until I was much older. His alcoholism and the way he treated my father. I didn't learn how he roughed my dad up until much later in life. I didn't understand why I only saw him about 3 or 4 times in my life, and it was my parents protecting me from him. So.
Now, I remember when you became governor, and you talked about this, and I remember thinking, well, I don't think any governor in the history of our state has ever made domestic violence, sexual assault, a major issue, a major pillar of his administration. And and now I kind of wonder why you did that, because it's risky. I mean, we'll talk about the National Guard scandal later, but when you take on something like that, you leave yourself open for criticism because there's so much domestic violence, sexual assault.
But I always come back to, if we're not in these positions to actually do something for Alaskans and to enable Alaskans to take positive, concrete steps for themselves to, in this case, safety and more opportunity for themselves, I don't know what else we're supposed to do with these positions. They're not meant to stroke somebody's ego. They're meant to be used as a trust by the people for their benefit. And it's risky to do something that nobody's ever tried, or that has been around for centuries and is likely to be around, but we can do something. And we've actually seen some really positive results in a number of our communities because of it.
Well, one of the things that probably people don't know about that is that you actually have staffers in your office tasked with this issue. And I don't think, but correct me if I'm wrong, that has ever happened in other administrations.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I did name Katie Tepas my domestic violence, sexual assault initiative director and person in my office for that post. And she also operates as a special assistant, meaning my interface with Department of Public Safety, Department of Corrections, and so she wears several hats, but her job is to really help to coordinate the Choose Respect initiative in our office. And that looks like, on the prevention side, it looks like making sure that communities have their resources for the Choose Respect rallies, which have grown from 10 communities in 2010, or 18 communities in 2010, to 173 communities in 2015, to making sure that we've got prevention grants in place and we've got shelter services funded, making sure we've got new VPSOs coming into the communities. So she really does kind of look over the whole initiative with respect to.
You've got basically some of the best advice possible sitting right next to you, and I guess that's what people wonder about is how could the Choose Respect governor be so embroiled in this National Guard scandal? I mean, why did it come to this point? I mean, we're getting revelations every day, and it sounds pretty ugly.
I ask myself that question as well because there's because of all the work that I've done in this area, and because of the passion in my heart for domestic violence victims and survivors, and because of my personal investment, as well as Sandy's personal investment in shelters in this state, not just through state work, but our own personal giving and time and money, it really does hit close to home when somebody says that I would not, that I waited to do something, when in fact I never waited to act upon a victim's concerns being expressed to me or my office.
Do you think that if any other governor had the information brought to you, and we don't really know what kind of information officially was brought to you because you haven't released the papers to the media.
I mean, actually you do. You had a news story that spoke to some victims who came forward to our office. You had me telling you that I had allegations of not just sexual assaults but other misconduct, like using guard assets for personal use was an allegation against one individual. I mean, so there was a range of misconduct. In fact, the recruiters who were so out of line, and and I'm going to assume just personally that they are guilty, although I think they have a right to the hearings that they're going through and whatnot. But they were removed from their jobs 2 years ago. So those sorts of things.
Just a personal story to share.
Yeah.
I recall sitting on a plane ride with you. I don't know exactly where it was, and I was asking you, being my nosy reporter self, asking you lots of questions, although I wasn't a reporter at the time, but you said to me, Rhonda, a word of advice. People, that are sitting next to us on airplane seats can hear conversations. And so right away I learned something about you, that you value discretion. That's one of, and I wondered if that instinct for discretion hampered you in this case.
I don't think so. I think actually my instinct to help victims and to believe them when they tell me something actually helped me in this case. And here's what I mean. In 2010, when I heard from a sexual assault victim, I immediately went and said, General Katkus, how did you treat this case? What happened with this case? And he was able to tell me, here's what happened. It went from me, it went to the sexual assault contractor at the time who handles those kinds of notices, and then it went to law enforcement, and the case was given to law enforcement. The same thing happened with the allegations of other misconduct, like the use of federal assets and equipment for personal use. I said, what happened with that particular case? And he said, that one went to an Inspector General investigation, and that Inspector General investigation found this, and the person was sanctioned with this, and it all sounded reasonable. And
so do you think any other governor, if they had been presented with the same circumstances, would have reacted as you did?
Well, let me use our congressional delegation as an example of the reasonableness of what I did. Senator Begich, for example, had an individual in his office who was hired by him, who was with the Guard, who in 2010 communicated with my office about allegations of misconduct, not related to sexual assaults, but other misconduct in the Guard that I investigated. That person went to work for Senator Begich, told Senator Begich about these allegations. Senator Begich, like I did, said, you got to do something. He went and got an Inspector General to look at the same set of circumstances that I did and was told the same thing by the Inspector General, that, you know what, everything looks like it's in order. What took too long was to get to the root of the matter. It didn't take too long for us to act, reasonably as we thought, but it took too long to get to the root of the matter. But now, looking forward, what I see is I'm the only governor that actually called in this Office of Complex Investigations, which was formed just a couple years ago in 2012, to do their review. And they gave us a roadmap to change. And that is the roadmap that we're following with their help.
Well, bottom line, did the Adjutant General Thomas Katkus lie to you?
He never lied to me by commission. I mean, what he did is he showed me the process that he had followed. And so I believe that that's what happened, in other words, but I wasn't getting the full picture that only a deep dive Office of Complex Investigation could give me. So for example, my office, that to my knowledge, never had any revelations of equal employment opportunity concerns or problems with a guard, but that was revealed in the report, and that's one of the 5 areas of concern that are being worked on. So it took this deep dive look with 185 interviews by OCI, with more than 1,000 survey responses from guard members to OCI, to give them and me this big picture look that there are serious problems here that we're going to fix.
Now, one of the things that people are asking, because it figures into the U.S. Senate race, is Dan Sullivan was your Attorney General from June 2009 to December 2005. So he was on board during when some of this material was coming to light.
So what dates did you give me?
I believe it was from 2009 until 2010 of December.
Okay.
So I mean, but I guess it doesn't really matter. He was there through some of this time.
Right.
How much did he know?
To my knowledge, I don't recall ever having a conversation with the Attorney General about it, because what was happening is the sexual assault allegations had been made. I went to General Katkus, found out they'd been referred to law enforcement, and so. And the files were still with law enforcement, as I was told at that time, with APD.
But why didn't you talk to him about it? I mean, these are sexual assaults. These are things that
because the Anchorage Police Department and the Fairbanks Police Department had it. I mean, that's where you go to report a sexual assault. You go to the police departments.
Well, one last question on this, and I want to move on to some other things. But people have said that what you should have done was called an independent investigator into this, a special prosecutor.
So. Number one, I go back and check the trap lines of the organization to see how they're working. They look to be working. If I had done that, I would have had the same result that Senator Begich did when he called in an independent look, the Inspector General, to do the same kind of look. But he had the added benefit of having a former Guard member who had concerns in his office, but they too found nothing. So at this point, it wasn't until February of 2014 when I got specific allegations about something that General Katkus had done that conflicted with what I had before, where I said, I'm going to go get that independent look.
Well, certainly this issue has suddenly become a huge factor in the campaign.
It is, but I think that diminishes really the importance of getting this right for Guard members and how they deserve to have it made right. And also, to come back to this point, I want Alaskans to shake the hand and thank every National Guard member for what they do. They put their lives on the line for us every day, and they do not deserve the tarnish of a brush that should only be applied to a small percentage of individuals in the Guard.
So one of the things, when you initially became governor, that was when
in 2009,
when Sarah Palin left, and then you stepped in. Potentially, if you're reelected, if you take those roughly 2 years,
1 year and a half,
this present term, and then if you're elected to the next one, you could be the longest-serving governor in Alaska history. And so, what do you want your legacy to be? I mean, you have a big block of time, more than any other governor, to do things. What is it that an extended Parnell administration means to the state?
Well, in a big picture, it means more opportunity for Alaskans. It's always been about creating opportunity for Alaskans. And I do that through creating policies that increase economic growth in our state, and I do it through policies that strengthen families. And we've talked about Choose Respect. I think about the education initiatives I've pursued, like the Alaska Performance Scholarship, the Alaska Education Opportunity Act. So those two areas, economic growth and stronger families, looking towards and moving towards opportunity for every Alaskan.
So let's just say that Walker Malott get elected into office. What does that potentially derail for you in your mind?
Well, it means that the gas line is stalled out because Bill Walker wants to renegotiate what we've done, even though we've made historic progress with the gas line. He's litigating against us at Point Thompson, so the 1,000 jobs that were there in the spring and the 700 in the summer, count those gone because he thinks he needs to renegotiate and do that deal over. Not sure really where he's going to go with the budget because he tells Great Alaska Schools we're going to increase the BSA, increase by hundreds of dollars the formula. But on the other hand, in Juneau in a debate with me, he says education's on the table for 16% cuts. So you don't really know where he's going to go there.
Well, the gas line, which is more than just a gas line, but a treatment facility on the North Slope.
Gas treatment plant, gas line, and liquefaction.
Plant. It's huge, but it's a long ways from being a done deal. And I've listened to legislative hearings. Your staffers talking about how it's kind of a delicate balancing act that we try to manage our savings and and deal wisely with things until this gas project comes online. But if we don't get this, and I'm sure that there's probably not going to be enough oil that we can put into the pipeline. We may be able to get more, but it doesn't. It looks like we could see a train wreck ahead if this gas project doesn't come to fruition.
Well, this gas line is hugely significant to Alaskans. It represents a lot. It represents not just the jobs in construction, but it's about $2 to $3 billion worth of revenue every year once it's full. And we're in a place now that we've never been. We've never had the state in the driver's seat for its ownership interests, and all of the companies in their seat, all paying money to move forward. We're all paying up to. The state's pitched in $70 million, and the other companies have pitched in theirs to cumulatively give about $500 million to do the engineering and the design work for this project. Once that's done in the next 12 to 14 months, all that work comes back to legislators for review, public vetting, and then a decision by legislators whether to put in the next installment of money, which will be more significant at that stage for that front-end engineering and design stage. But we are making historic progress, and for Bill Walker to say he doesn't like the structure of the deal and wants to renegotiate it, that just means it will be delayed. No matter what happens, if he gets elected, it will be delayed. If I'm reelected, I'll get us a gas line. I'll keep moving us forward on this path we're on. I'll bring the work back to legislators and back to the public in this 12 to 14 month time frame. And beyond that, I think the other opportunity that I offer and I have a vision for is for our kids. I think about the fact that in the next 8 years, 95,000 people are going to be leaving our workforce, and about 36,000 new jobs are estimated to be created. That's 125 or 130,000 new jobs. But 4 out of 5 of those jobs require a skill or a trade. And I said, why not train up our kids to give them a chance coming out of high school to go right to work with a skill or a trade? Why not, when they graduate, how come they can't get a diploma for high school and get a certificate for a trade so they can go right to work if they want to do that? We have that ability in just a couple places in the state, but I've proposed just blowing the doors open on CTE education, career and technical education in this state, because we've got a growing economy and we've got an aging, retiring workforce, and we've got young people who can connect there. And to me, that's one of the best ways we can increase the graduation rate.
So when you go into your office, or I'm not sure which entrance you use, I don't know if you always go in through the front, but you...
Depends if you're talking about the Capitol office or the
your
Anchorage
Capitol
office.
Okay. You pass that pantheon of Alaska governors. Sometimes I always stop by and look at Jay Hammond and kind of say hello. Which governor do you identify with when you pass by? I always kind of look at Mike Stepovich and
and Governor Egan, Bill Egan. I remember meeting Bill Egan as a kid when he was in the very later years of his life. But I always look at those two and pair them together because that was the transition from
Right, Stepovich was territorial.
right from the territory of Alaska to the state of Alaska, and so I kind of keep those two pictures together in my mind because that was when my father was here at Fort Richardson as a soldier. And that's when he saw the opportunity of Alaska for his family and translated that dream to me, or gave me that dream about Alaska being a land of opportunity. So I always kind of look at those two pictures together.
I have an interesting exercise that I do for my own amusement. I talk to retiring state employees and I ask them, especially those that have been there a long time, to characterize administrations with phrases. And it's very telling and interesting. Of course, Wally Hickel, Wally World, Governor Boss, Ranch Boss, Tony Knowles, Deliland, Frank Murkowski, Bankerville.
Most of those are kind of pejorative,
Well, so, and I've heard a few for you,
You don't have to say them, it's okay.
Governor Oatmeal was one of them.
That was early days, wasn't it? That was
Governor-
before we had so many results from my service. Yeah.
So if there were a tagline for you, what would you want it to be?
Well, I actually think if you took a poll in my office, like write down one word that describes what you think this governor is after or what he's accomplished, I think you'd see a majority would write the word opportunity.
So you're Governor Opportunity?
If you want to call me that, but I think that's the one word that they would say that I focus in on everything we do, and it's opportunity for Alaskans. And whether it's creating the climate for all the jobs that we're now seeing coming to the oil patch and that have effect downline, or whether it means giving a domestic violence victim some margin of safety so that they can grasp more Alaskan opportunity. That's what I speak to. That's my heart for Alaskans.
Well, somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. That's the way it is. And
that's actually the beauty of our system, that there is some finality, some certainty, and the people get to decide. And that's what I love about our system. Yeah.
So let's just suppose that you lose, that you are elected, not reelected. So what then for Sean Parnell?
I think what then is I'm going to look forward to having our first grandchild, and I'll be able to enjoy that in mid-November. And we'll have to sit down, me and Sandy, at that point and evaluate it. I haven't had those discussions with her.
So let's talk about what happens from between here and the final stretch of the election.
Yeah. So what happens between here and the final stretch of the election is we're working to communicate my message of opportunity for Alaskans, of economic growth, of stability, certainty. You know who I am, you know where I stand, versus kind of an ever-changing Bill Walker, an ever-evolving Bill Walker. And that's the juxtaposition that I'm working to communicate. But I have to do that through every means possible, whether through radio, TV, meeting one-on-one with folks. We just had a town meeting, kind of a meet and greet in Nikiski, for example, just 2 days ago. And so it really is about communicating and meeting with as many Alaskans as I can. It's also about debates. So I've had 8 debates of 13 that I've confirmed so far. So there are about 5 more opportunities for Alaskans to get to know us through various debates. That's something that will happen. That's a lot of debates the next 2 weeks.
So sort of a final question for you is, let's say you do get elected. Will you finish your term? I mean, you could opt to run for Congress if Don Young retires.
Well, actually, that rumor started by Bill Walker, kind of just to play into this a little bit. Bill Walker started the rumor that I was going to run against Lisa Murkowski. He said it on talk radio, and I heard that come out of there. And I called Senator Murkowski and I said, "Senator, you're running for office in 2 years, aren't you?" And she said, "I am." And I said, "Well, Bill Walker is saying that I'm going to run against you, and I want you to know, Senator Lisa, that I will not run against you. I just want you to know."
I guess we just want it on the record.
I just told you. I'm.
Will you finish your term if you're elected?
That's my intention, absolutely. And I told her I'm not running against her. I don't know of any open seat right now. So.
All All right. Well, I
but let me-
certainly. You have one more thing you want to say before we
Yeah,
wrap up?
let me come back to that. I'm the only candidate in the race who's actually completed a term I've been elected to. And I've actually completed, I think, 5 terms of office, so, and the duties of all those offices. So that'd be a good question to ask on the Walker-Malott side, where neither one of them, although they've been elected to office, have never finished their term.
All right.
All right?
Many questions to ask, and we do
So
not
little
have enough
time,
time
huh?
to address them all. Interesting ones. So
Yeah.
thanks very much for spending
bet.
some time with us, Governor Sean Parnell.